Hi, everyone. Welcome to Console Room 2021. We are here to talk about Disney live action remakes. My name is Amber. I am co-chair of Console Room. I'm going to pass the virtual baton on to the others to introduce themselves too. Jason, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Jason, the other co-chair of Console Room, and also a big Disney fan. Was fortunate enough to visit Disneyland back in February of 2020 before everything closed down. And I can't wait to visit one of the parks again.
Awesome. And Tieran.
Yep. Hi, I'm Tieran Cisco. I'm not a co-chair of Console Room, but I'm a huge fan, and it's an awesome con. Also a huge fan of Disney. Sadly, the last time I was at a Disney park, though, it's been 3 years. It was Disney World. I'm more of a Disneyland kind of guy, but love Disney World. Actually, all Disney is good Disney. It's kind of like gummy bears. You can never have too much.
Yeah, I like that. I've been missing the parks too. The last time I went was last December, so about a year ago. So I'm hoping we get to go again soon. And a huge Disney fan. So we have 16 live action remakes, which is actually fewer than I thought when I think about live action remakes. It feels like to me there should be more, but there's been 16 released so far, and that includes some earlier than the 2000s. The earliest one being an adaptation of The Jungle Book, which I actually haven't seen. That came out in 1994. And then going all the way up to 94. Yep, it was Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book.
Yeah. Was that before the 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close?
It was. That was 1996.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. 102 Dalmatians came out in 2000.
I've been incorrect in my trivia.
Oh, okay. And then I think the most recent was Mulan, which came out this year on Disney Plus. So let's dive right into it with the movies that have come out. What have you liked and what have you not liked? Whoever wants to go first.
Go ahead, T.
I've liked all of them. I think there are a few standouts that were really surprising. But yes, I've seen, in reviewing the list and prepping for this panel, I realized that, I've seen all of the live action adaptations of the animated films, and that's great. I enjoy them, some more than others, but I really liked Cinderella was a huge standout just because that time period was a brilliant choice. I thought the set design, the costume design is phenomenal. And also Cate Blanchett as the Wicked Stepmother was probably the most pitch perfect casting comparable to like Angelina Jolie as Maleficent, or even like RDJ as Tony Stark. Like, she was outstanding. So yeah, Cinderella is definitely probably like top of the pops for me, followed closely by the Jungle Book that Jon Favreau did a few years back. Just because the blend of the one human actor, the young kid who played Mowgli, and then the animals, which were photorealistic, but not to the extent that the Lion King did it, where they still actually retained just enough animation in their faces that they weren't off-putting and still very charismatic. So yeah, Cinderella #1, but the Jungle Book that Jon Favreau did is a very close second.
I think it's interesting. You can go ahead, Jason.
No, after you.
Cinderella is actually one of my least favorite ones, and it's not because of the casting. I think the casting's amazing, and I love Kenneth Branagh as a director. I've really enjoyed pretty much everything that he's done. I'm not really into the story of Cinderella, and moving from the animated to live action didn't improve the story for me. It's gorgeous though. Like, I love the dress, and like as a cosplayer, like there's so many costumes I want to pull out of that show, because like I think it was visually like stunning, and I think the casting was phenomenal. But the story has never really been interesting to me, so I think that one's probably never going to be high on my list. And it's not because they did a bad job with the adaptation. It just isn't. I'm more into the original like Hans Christian Andersen, which is very not Disney. It's not a Disney kind of story. So, but I actually haven't seen any of the like the animal stories, I guess, with like Lion King and Dumbo and Jungle Book. I haven't had a chance to see those ones yet. So I'm interested to see those ones now that you're talking about how they've handled the animation a little bit differently. But I'm going to pass this on to Jason.
I have not seen all of them. I haven't seen Cinderella. It's on my list, but I'm waiting for it to come to Disney Plus, I guess. Which I think it's still available for rental on Amazon Prime, and I might just go ahead and rent it. It should, I guess, eventually come to Disney Plus, but yesterday in prepping for this, I ended up watching Mulan, Dumbo, and Lady and the Tramp. I would say out of all the different ones, my favorite has probably been the original 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close, back in apparently 1996. I had thought it was the first live action remake, but apparently that was the Jason Scott Lee Jungle Book was 94. Although when we mention that, there's kind of two different branches where we're talking about live action interpretations. There's the live action remakes, like The Lion King, Lady and the Tramp, 101 Dalmatians, and live action prequels or reimaginings, which I think that's, we're talking about Maleficent and Maleficent 2. That Jason Scott Lee Jungle Book takes place, after Mowgli's grown up. So, there's kind of two different branches. This upcoming one with Emma Stone, Cruella, there's all these origin stories and everything as well. How did the villains become villainous? And then actually, something I thought of that's kind of like, it's a way of seeing the characters, the animated characters as live action, would be the Descendants movies on the Disney Channel. I don't know if you've seen any of those.
I've seen the first two, I think.
Because it has Kristen Chenoweth as Maleficent. Mm-hmm. She's a little smaller than you would imagine. And Kathy Najimy as the evil queen, and I'm kind of a fan of those movies. So I would say that my favorite has probably been the 101 Dalmatians.
I think if I was thinking of my favorite of these, and it's not my favorite animated film that it was an adaptation of, is Alice in Wonderland. And it's probably mostly, I really didn't enjoy the animated one as a kid. It was one of my least favorite ones. But I think it's a very dark kind of story, and I think up that darkness and creepiness a little bit to me. As a kid, it was very off-putting. I really love Tim Burton's films in general. Like, I'm a pretty big Tim Burton fan. So I think what he brought to that helped, I think, capture more of the wonder to me. But I would almost think, Jason, when you're talking about like the ones that are more of like reimaginings versus like adaptations, like Alice in Wonderland is almost a reimagining than an adaptation too, because it's very dissimilar to, there's the main bits, I guess, are the same as like the animated one, but otherwise it's a very different story. And I think that's the case with a lot of, maybe not all of these, but a good number of them, where it's still, they've changed a significant amount to the original story. I think Beauty and the Beast might not be in that book. I feel like they mostly followed that for the most part.
I think with most of the ones where it's a closer it's an actual remake. I mean, they've
Mhm.
definitely added stuff. I'd say the one that comes the absolute closest to the original is probably The Lion King, which we'll get into that, I'm sure. But like with Beauty and the Beast, they added the backstory with her mother. With
I suppose, yeah.
Dumbo, you know, they had the entire second half of the movie is, I mean, Dumbo, it's the original Dumbo is only like an hour long, and the live action version is 2 hours. And so they added an entire second movie to it because, you know, they couldn't exactly do an hour long live action remake. You said you mentioned that you're a big Tim Burton fan. Have you seen Dumbo?
No, I haven't yet. But
Okay.
I'm expecting something similar to Big Fish-ish with elephants. No.
I mean, it is definitely a Tim Burton film. And it's sort of like, actually building off something you mentioned, Jason, just a little earlier, like there's like sort of 2 tracks. I think it's almost 3 tracks, because there's like the live action films that are based on the same source material as their animated predecessors. Then there's the live action films that are almost a direct remake of their animated predecessors. Then there's the ones that are in between, where kind of like Dumbo, I think Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, where they stick very close to the main plot points, but then they add so much that it really isn't, I don't think it's fair to call it like a remake, or it's an adaptation of the original, but drawing so much extra content, it becomes sort of like I don't know, like when DJs or EDM folks do like samples where it's like, oh yeah, this is from a different song, but now that we've added all these other things to it, it's a whole new work, even though it's still whatever. So,
or a whole new world.
There we go. That's going to be coming soon. But no, Dumbo was good. I mean, I feel like Tim Burton has always been sort of like Disney's like side piece, because like especially his earlier work, there's definitely a Disney feel, but it was like Disney through the Tim Burton lens. Going back to his very non-Disney stuff. But yeah, Wonderland, and then like his sequel, the follow-up, Looking Glass, which was what, 2017-ish?
2016. That's close. Nice.
That was definitely like he read a lot of Lewis Carroll, the works, and said, all right, now I'm going to add my swing to that, and it just happens to be produced and released by Disney. But that didn't feel like a Disney movie really at all. It was like Disney in logo only, with characters we're familiar or pop culturally familiar with through the Disney brand.
Sure.
And Dumbo also, yeah, I mean, because the original Dumbo is, like Jason mentioned, very short, but it makes sense that it's short because it's based on an actual like young children's book, not like Mary Poppins.
Oh, is it?
Like YA, like the Dumbo kids book is like a picture book. It's only, I think maybe 12 or 24 pages. It's very short. And the fact that they stretched out an hour back in 19 whatever was like, wow, that's crazy. Good thing we got this pink elephant segment to pad the time. And Tim Burton was like, well, you want to pad some time, hold my like absinthe. And he went crazy with it. For better and worse, like Dumbo, I think too, there's like this weird, it definitely feels like they're more self-aware, the later live action films, where it feels like with Cinderella and the earlier ones, especially like 101 Dalmatians and even Pete's Dragon, which I guess is kind of in the mid, not really new or old, it's just sort of right in the middle. They were like, all right, we'll just kind of do what we did, but we'll do it with like the special effects have enabled us to do it with live actors. And then with some of the backlash from fans and some of the mixed reviews here and there, they're like, well, okay, maybe we should start adding stuff to it. And they became very self-aware. Then Lion King, is it fair to call the Lion King remake or modern adaptation?
A live action remake?
Right. Because I mean,
it's not live action.
We were just talking about this afternoon too, because like it's not, I mean, they didn't bring in, real lions, but it is a realistic adaptation. I mean, more realism in the animation, I guess, right?
But it's still, yeah, because it is animation. Like when the Lion King, the predecessor, came out, that was kind of groundbreaking with some of the scenes, and I remember a lot of buzz. I was the target demo when that movie was released. It's maybe slightly older, but that was gorgeous, and everyone's like, "Wow, this is incredible! The things they're doing." And then I think if you hadn't been there or were unaware of that fanfare, watching the newer Lion King was also kind of like, "Whoa!" Like none of this is all pixels. Like none of this is real, but it looks like they actually went out to the savannah and trained a bunch of animals very, very well. I don't understand why they recast the voice talent. though. I never got that because it is basically a frame by frame remake of the pen and ink version. They could have just used the same voice track.
I mean, they did use one of the voices, but yeah, I thought the same. Like Nathan Lane hasn't retired, and yeah, I mean, well, all right, let's just jump into. I know you're the moderator, Amber, but let's jump into the Lion King. And yeah, when I saw the live action Lion King, the whole time I'm watching, I just kept thinking, why was this necessary? You know, and it made so much money. So of course Disney's going to say, absolutely, it was necessary. But like, when it comes to that movie, after seeing it once, say you have a Blu-ray of the original animated Lion King, and a Blu-ray of the new Lion King, and you were gifted the new one because why would anyone buy it? But like, or you have Disney Plus and your choices. Okay, we're gonna watch the Lion King. Which Lion King are you gonna choose to watch after you've seen the new one? After you've seen it once, which one are you gonna go back to watch again?
But I think this depends on like the audience a little bit, right? Because like for me, I like to go back to the original animated because those are what I grew up with. So like I enjoy those still more than I enjoy a lot of the live action ones. But if you are, you know, the younger generation these days, are you going to prefer something that feels more realistic than the animated ones that maybe all of us grew up with?
Okay, but wait, you say you grew up with the animated ones, but you're talking about a bunch of ones that came out 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years before you were born.
Right.
You know, the whole thing about them getting re-released over and over again for a new generation. They're classics, they're timeless. So, you know, when you say that these are the new ones that the new people grew up with, well, but they're also growing up with these original ones.
Yeah.
You know, that the whole reason why they kept releasing the same ones on disc over and over again, and now Disney Plus, is that everyone is able to see it. And so I get back to like, even with you know, the current crop of under 10s, you know, are they, if you said, which one do you want to watch? Do you want to watch the cartoon, or do you want to watch the one with the real animals? Do you think they're gonna, which ones? I mean, I don't know, I don't have kids, but I'm kind of hoping to think that they would go after the one that's an actual cartoon.
Oh,
the one where the production number of you know, with the I Just Can't Wait to Be King actually looks fun to watch. I mean, that new version of I Just Can't Wait to Be King is so bad.
It was the Jeff Goldblum effect. Like, they were so wrapped up with whether or not they could. and I've got two in the target demo, and they've seen both, and both prefer the animated or the previous,
the original animated.
Yes, the JTT animated version, as do I. The Matt Broderick, Nathan Lane,
Ernie Sabella.
Right. It's just because the newer CGI live action one, it would have been better if, instead of trying to make, I think two ways, and this is just, you know, armchair producing. I think either if they had done sort of like a Meerkat Manor or March of the Penguins type of thing, where they didn't have the animals anthropomorphized and just had them interacting with the narrator telling the story, that could have worked a little bit. And that would have been an interesting spin on the original story, which is basically kind of like Hamlet for the, you know, grammar school set. Or if they had taken a page out of Jon Favreau's Jungle Book and made it photorealistic enough that it still looks like, wow, that's real, but with slight changes so that way when the animals are emoting, because some animals, with respect to the entire kingdom and are, you know, they're just not that cute if they're photorealistic. Like Pumbaa and Timon, amazing as Nathan Lane and the other guy when they're pinning, when they're pixels and they look like warthog. Like there's a scene when he farts in the camera, like cartoon butt, fantastic. It's hilarious. Not cartoon butt, like anatomically correct, scary nature special butt. That's not a cute scene. It's disgusting, and not in like a haha gross out kid way. It's like legit, like ew. They could have panned away from that. Also, just for my own personal entertainment, if the animals aren't emoting, then it kind of like takes so much away from the dialogue, because
Yeah.
like lions are cats. Cats are not very expressive. So like the same expressions that Simba was using when he was talking to Nala and falling in love were basically the same expressions he was using talking to Scar when he learned that Scar murdered his dad. Spoilers. Like and like hyenas are not cute creatures to begin with.
Yeah.
So like Whoopi Goldberg.
I think my cats would argue that they are pretty emotive. But besides the point. You know what's kind of interesting, because you're bringing up like Jungle Book and Lion King, and both were directed by Jon Favreau.
Yes.
So I wonder like what the difference in decisions there was to have the emoting versus not emoting. Because I haven't watched all the way through Jungle Book. I saw part of it in the beginning, so I think I know what you're talking about and how they were at least like expressing. I mean, they did seem very expressive.
A little bit, like it was subtle enough that, I mean, as adults we can like, oh, like okay, a panther's face doesn't do that, or like when he meets Baloo. I mean, Bill Murray is great and everything, so to have Baloo's eyebrows kind of be like Bill Murray-esque, it's like, okay, a real grizzly probably doesn't do that, but you don't care because it's a part of the movie, you understand that. Whereas in Lion King, Favreau, I feel like he's like, well, the technology has increased even more, it's gotten this much better these past few years, we can take it another step further and make it actually look like these are real animals. And I think no one asked the guy who directed Jungle Book and Iron Man, is gonna, you know, he's like Disney's golden boy. No one's like, Mr. Favreau, that looks terrible.
And you know, he's been rewarded for his bad behavior.
And the one positive I will say is that the textures and the elements in the backgrounds are phenomenal, because I think with Lion King was similar to Jungle Book, they had that little disclaimer that like the entire thing was shot in a massive studio in Los Angeles. But the fact that the Serengeti looks like the Serengeti, like the desert, like it was incredible. It's just the actual characters in those settings were off-putting.
I will agree with you there. You know, the cinematography for The Lion King was pretty spectacular. You know, you know, I was saying that just yesterday I watched Mulan, Dumbo, and Lady and the Tramp. And in Dumbo and Lady and the Tramp, again, we have animals that are being cinematically manipulated to perform. In Dumbo, I'm pretty sure that Dumbo was entirely CGI. And he is not cute. I don't. You again. You have kids.
I agree.
Of this demographic. What did your kids think of the Dumbo elephant?
My youngest.
I assume they've seen it.
My youngest fell asleep because it was too much Dumbo. It's 2 hours of Dumbo is a lot of Dumbo, or 2+ hours. It's a little over 2 hours, right? My oldest was not a fan. She likes a lot of the nature shows on like Disney Plus. There's a show called Secrets of the Zoo. Love the baby animals, but in that context where they're like clearly animals. Like Tim Burton's Dumbo was like sort of Uncanny Valley for the nature crowd set, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like it was realistic, but not in a cute way.
It doesn't even look like a baby elephant, you know, and it just, I mean, as far as that goes, you know, make it look like the rides, you know, the Dumbo rides at Disneyland, you know, if you want to make it, you know, actual CGI, make a CGI version of the, you know, the ride itself. But yeah, Dumbo looked like, again, a lot of great performances from the kids, from Danny DeVito, from Michael Keaton. Colin Farrell was a bit stiff. Eva Green, but the actual Dumbo character itself just looked terrible. But then I watched Lady and the Tramp, and I'm like, you know, I have no problem with the dogs in Lady and the Tramp. And what I'm thinking there is that there have been at this point, there have been so many movies that have had talking dogs of some sort. Or at least dogs, even if they don't emote, you know, we're hearing a voiceover
Like Milo and Otis or something like that.
Milo and Otis. I don't know if they talk in An Incredible Journey or not. Oh Heavenly Dog. Yeah, just Look Who's Talking, whatever. But yeah, so we're kind of used to having dogs and even cats, like house cats, as opposed to lions. That, you know, when we see their faces moving in ways that make them talk, we're not disturbed in the same way that Lion King was disturbing.
I wonder who's it for? Like what the intended audience. So like another, like Pete's Dragon was a great live action adaptation with a huge CGI dragon. I mean, it wasn't like the stories are, it's whatever. It was fine. I enjoyed it. But dog, or it's based very heavily on like canine elements to make this dragon for Pete's Dragon. And it doesn't look, it's not like Game of Thrones, like Viserion or anything like that, where it's like, oh, if dragons existed, this is probably what they look like. It's like, no, this is a big fuzzy CGI cartoon that looks photorealistic, because that's what we want, because we're going to a Disney movie. And I feel like I don't know who the intended audience is, that like, is there anyone out there that's saying like, yeah, that was kind of cool, but I really wish it was like an actual warthog, or I really wish that like Zazu looked like an actual whatever, that secretary bird. It's like, is anyone really clamoring for that? To have this hyper realism?
I wonder if it's partly I feel like it's maybe partly trying to just like key into all of the nostalgia that I think a lot of people seem to be, I don't know, there seems to be a lot of nostalgia stuff coming out these days. So I wonder if a part of it's like, okay, so you're feeling some nostalgia for like these shows that you grew up with. How about another one so we can make more money off of you? Like, I love Disney, but like, I mean, they're making a lot of money off of me because I keep watching these things. But I wonder if also part of it, like I don't like anime, for example. Like I have a hard time with that style. So like having a different style is helpful for me. Like I've never really dug the anime, like how they emote and things in there. And so like, but if I had the same story in like live action, I generally respond better to that. So I wonder if part of that's, I mean, my assumption is most of it is a nostalgia factor, but I wonder if part of it's also like, you know, if you like don't dig the animated kind of style, then, you know, at least here's a different one. And then the other thing I think is some of these, now that it's been a long time, like Dumbo came out, the original Dumbo came out in 1941, like that's a long time ago. Sleeping Beauty came out in 1959. The Jungle Book came out in 1967. Cinderella came out in 1950. Like a lot of these have been around for a while. And I think in a lot of the live action remakes, they've changed the messaging a little bit too. So I think part of it is probably that too. Like I think that stands out to me a lot in like Beauty and the Beast. They changed it a little bit and made her, I think they gave like Belle more agency in the live action than they did in the animated. I think of Mulan with this one too, but I kind of have a beef with Mulan with the live action one. But the messaging overall, I think, changed to match the time. So I think maybe part of it's that there is an audience that is looking for a different kind of messaging and a different kind of focus. And like there are some problems, I think, in a lot of these animated ones in how they've told their story. I think a little bit that's less acceptable now.
I think there's a big fleshing out. Like even with like Aladdin, like
fleshing out.
Yeah, there you go. A lot of fleshing out of the characters and the arcs and making them more compelling. Because I think a lot of the older, in their initial runs as animated features, they were definitely hardcore. Like, this is for kids. We know parents will watch them because they have to take their kids to the cinema. But really, these are children's movies. And so that's fine. Whereas I think now they're more the broad appeal. Like, I don't think they've been PG-13, or most of them haven't been. They've all been safely in the GPG realm, but Disney's kind of like perfected that formula of like, we can make a universal story, or a story that has a much more universality in terms of its appeal. So by giving Jasmine more agency, by giving Belle, because Belle and Beauty and the Beast is one of my favorite films of all time. The animated, I saw it at the right time. I just struck that right chord. But Belle's a jerk. And Gaston is really not a bad dude. Like when you watch that animated one, you're like, wait a second, Belle's just super rude. Gaston's operating with the information he has. He's sort of heroic because he's like, wait, what? A monster stole this dude and then he kidnapped her and we need to go save him. And like the crazy guy saying something different. Well, he's crazy. I'm going to go rally townsfolk and rescue the one who I like and who I'm kind of pushy. But there's a difference between being pushy and being a villain because he asks Belle out or he proposes to her. He has some interesting ideas about marriage. She says no. And he's like, cool, I'm going to ask you tomorrow. That's as far as harassment goes, that's pretty low on the totem pole. He's not like an Aziz Ansari type character. He's more like, he's in like the George Clooney part of like the like eyebrow raise, like, dude, maybe lay off a little bit. But I don't. He's not quite like at the Aziz Ansari, sort of like, went way too far, bro.
He does threaten to blackmail Belle with locking up her father,
so that she would marry him. Yeah,
but he doesn't, because she says no, and then he tries to save her life. He cares. He just expresses it weirdly because, as they established.
That's what it is. He's just expressing his love weirdly.
I would argue that Gaston is like toxic masculinity embodied in a character, and less of like a hero. The fact that he can't take no for an answer when she has emphatically multiple times said no, and then takes it upon himself to then take out that frustration on the person that she is interested in. I would argue that Gaston is not a hero in any sense.
But let's talk about the person she's interested in. Like, one, Gaston doesn't know that she's interested in him. Two, even taking Gaston out of the equation, that you want to talk about toxic relationships. He's like, well, I'm going to keep your dad. She's like, no, I'll stay instead. Fine. In fact, I'm going to keep you prisoner here until you love me, which is that's his specific plan.
Oh,
like verbatim. Like,
there's definitely been problematic
horrifying.
Elements.
Like if Gaston is sort of like between George Clooney and Aziz Ansari, like Prince the Beast, he's in like that Buffalo Bill zone. Like that is a very not cool. Like Belle's got no choices. Also, Gaston's an idiot. At least he's got that for him. Like he's emotionally and intellectually lower on the totem pole. he's got some deficiencies.
Yeah.
Like the prince is just a jerk. He's like a furry incel with a ton of money.
I think in Beauty and the Beast there are no good characters. Everyone's kind of crappy.
It's just Chip.
I still love it. I still like, even though like when you think about it this way, like most of these characters are horrible. They're all kind of jerks. They really are. Still one of my favorite stories, and I guess I can't explain that because they are kind of all crappy. But yeah,
I think that's been a tough one for a ton of parents to reconcile their love of Beauty and the Beast with empowering their daughters. But that's definitely something, as we were talking about, where they tried to tone a little bit of that down for the live action version. And I think that's the only way they would have been able to get Emma Watson to participate as well. But out of the live action, Beauty and the Beast is definitely in probably my top 3 for the remakes and such. Although I really talking about twisting who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, we have Maleficent and Maleficent Mistress of Darkness, and where especially in the sequel, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy when you bring in Michelle Pfeiffer's character. And that was a very interesting twist. What's that?
I haven't seen the sequel.
Oh, okay.
It's really good.
To know.
But that's because that does answer a lot of questions. Because in the older or the predecessors, a lot of the villains, it's kind of like a Star Wars dynamic. Like these are the bad guys because the film just says these are the bad guys, and that's kind of like that's as much as you get. Occasionally, depending on the film, like with 101 Dalmatians, they give them a motivation. Like, okay, that's definitely kind of an evil thing since we're seeing it from the point of view of this character, a character that wants to skin the other one and all of their children. That's usually a bad guy. But I think the the newer ones are really good about putting that context in place and making them much more sympathetic, except for Aladdin, because Aladdin, they left the same plot holes from the animated into the live action. And I did love the live action, and that's another one where I think the things they added, they like Jasmine is fantastic in Aladdin as a character compared to her animated predecessor. But Jafar, it's sort of like you forget that you can hypnotize people. Like, what are you doing, bro? Like,
I think, and for me, a lot of these, at least the Disney princess ones in general, and I guess I would put Maleficent in there, is that like I think I enjoyed how they've portrayed the characters a bit more. In general, I'm kind of just fine with them. I don't think any of them have hit like they're probably not going to be on like my top favorite lists, I think, because they have kept some of those plot holes, or they've made new ones, or they've made like other I don't know, questionable choices, I think, with so that I mean I think they've been fine. I enjoy them, but Aladdin kind of hits that bucket with me. Like I really enjoy Jasmine much more in the live action than in the original. The story itself I'm kind of about. I don't feel any stronger about it than I did about. I mean, I like them both, but they're fine. They don't.
I mean, Aladdin's great because Aladdin is the Disney princess. Like, if you compare the story arcs with other like Disney properties of princess films, like Jasmine's the princess because she's the Sultan's daughter, but the Disney princess in Aladdin is Aladdin. Like, it's the main character. He's the primary protagonist. He's the one who goes through the growth. He has the challenges, and then his reward is the handsome princess. Like, which they did balance.
Looking at it.
They balanced it better in the live action version, and I think adding that depth too, because Disney hates parents. It's kind of like an old trope that's been around probably since Steamboat Willie. Disney does not like parents, or at least since Bambi and Snow White. But at least they kind of explain how that played into it, giving Jasmine some emotional depth to her character also, like that. Okay, that was fun.
They did that in Beauty and the Beast too, with bringing in Belle's mom, like explaining like she just didn't. It's not like she didn't have two parents. She just like this thing happened and it's impacted the rest of their lives. Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of interested in some of these newer ones. Well, I'm interested a little because we've been talking about how they've been changing the stories a little bit. So I'm interested in what you think on Cinderella and how that's changed, because we haven't really talked about Cinderella since the beginning of this panel. So I'm interested in that.
I loved it because of some of the things we talked about, because we did get that backstory with her mom and dad, or Cinderella's mom and dad, and like her dad working so hard to keep up and then having to marry her stepmother because of the financial situation of the times. And then so we got that. It was nice because I mean it's not like a ton of more meat on the bone, because the story is still it's the story, but at least having that context did add some weight to the character. I thought it made Cinderella much more sympathetic and even relatable in some aspects. So like, because who hasn't been in a situation that was out of their control, that just in over their heads? That's pretty easy to relate to. I thought Helena Bonham Carter was surprisingly like toned down and was a great fairy godmother. And actually, that just kind of brings me to the only thing that was, I thought it was odd sticking it in the belly pock. I'm happy they did put it in that era, because again, the costumes and set design were amazing. But in doing so, it made the transformation sequences of the animals into the coachmen. That was body horror. That was like straight up David Lynch. Like, whoa, what's going on? Like nightmare fuel for 3 minutes, and then it's back to like, yay, like pumpkin carriage, and like we got to get home by midnight. Because just for a second, it was hardcore, horrifying.
I think that's kind of a thing with a lot of these live action films that seem to be coming up, is that it's like they're not finding a good balance in the live action adaptations between like the cute and like feel good stories that we're used to from Disney, and the like, you know, realistically, this is what's going to be happening, and it's not good.
But I thought,
Yeah, I definitely need to catch the Cinderella version before too long.
the fashion alone is worth it. Like, even if you hate the Cinderella story, like the mythos, like that set design, that fashion, everything that Kate Blanchett wears is like a whole new statement. I mean, the Belle Epoque by itself is a great era in French history, just for everything, because everything in France is kind of awesome. Well, almost everything, but like, just like Parisian.
Yeah, that revolution period.
So gorgeous.
But it is a gorgeous movie. I've enjoyed Kenneth Branagh's take on like most things that he directs, and I feel like you can feel his touch, like how you can feel Tim Burton when it's very much a Tim Burton movie. I think Cinderella feels very much like a Kenneth Branagh movie, and it is gorgeous. Even if you don't like the story, like me, like I've never really been into Cinderella, but it is gorgeous. Like as a cosplayer, like for sure. I would drown in mountains of tulle and organza for a dress like that, because it's really, really pretty. So before I know there's some movies coming up, but I mentioned Mulan is like the most recent one, and then I think that was Disney Plus only. Actually, the most recent ones, like look, they've all been through Disney Plus. Lady and the Tramp actually was 2019, which I thought was further away. And I'm kind of curious what you think about Mulan as the most recent live action as well.
I'll start. I enjoyed Mulan more than I thought I was going to. I was not. It wasn't one that I was hugely excited to watch, and I was actually surprised. I thought they were going to go more wuxia on it. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. WUXIA. The
I think you are.
Yeah, the traditional Chinese hero tale with lots of wire work and stuff like that. But so I thought it was gonna, and I mean there was plenty of the wuxia style, but it was definitely Disney's take on wuxia rather than a strict Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon type of thing. I watched it yesterday, and I probably would have gone to see it in the theater. I am not upset that I didn't see it in the theater. One of the things that I did do was after the training montage, I stopped it and went and watched Out of View scene from the animated version, because I missed the music so much for the live action Mulan. I mean, they had little hints of it here and there, but I love the music in Mulan. It really makes it for me. And you know, I kind of missed Eddie Murphy's shtick as well a bit. So, but I felt that it's a good companion piece to the animated version. And I think it helped at the opening that they said there have been many stories told about Mulan. This is my story. So to kind of say this is going to be different, but it's still Mulan. One thing that did strike me was at the end where Mulan comes back to warn them about the attempt on the Emperor's life, and you know, all of her comrades are like, we should believe her, and I'm like, wow, so different than women in the military these days. Good thing it's not about you know, assault or anything like that.
I feel like with Mulan being the most recent, and the reason I bring it up is mostly is because it's the most recent. So like as we've seen this evolution of like Disney adaptations going to live action, and kind of how I mean the most recent, there's been some older ones like in the 90s, but like more recently, these mostly started 2010, 2014 and on. So, I mean, really within the last decade. And so I think it's interesting how I feel like they haven't quite hit the right balance yet still. When we're talking about like, they're updating the story a bit, and then they modify it enough to try and like hit a modern audience. And I feel Mulan to me was like very much yep, we still haven't hit this yet, but we recognize that this is, I mean, I think the animated film of Mulan is probably one of the more problematic ones. And I think that they did update enough that it feels, I mean, more relevant now. And yet still missed some points, because like Jason, when you mentioned that he was like, this is my Mulan story, but it wasn't Mulan starting the movie. Like the very first lines of speech in the movie are her dad, which to me actually came across really negatively for me, because I was like, this isn't about you. This is about Mulan. Don't make this about you being her dad. Like this is her story. And I think while I love the wire work, I think what frustrated me a little bit about it is that like the way that they presented it was, to me, like this isn't because you worked really hard, it's because you were born with magic powers and you figured out how to tap into them. And that kind of wasn't that wasn't a good message to me, I think. That like the only reason that you're doing well in this environment is because you happen to be born special. So for me watching that, I was like, I mean, at least I missed the songs. I kind of get why they got rid of them in like today's environment, but I felt like the messaging to me was still like a bit off. Like I think you were maybe trying to please too many people with this update to the story.
I mean, that's interesting, because I got I won't say the opposite reaction, but I thought so. I love the inclusion of I forget the character's name, but sort of the sorceress.
Yeah.
And then they had that confrontation early in the first act, kind of towards the end of the first act, start of the second act. And when the sorceress is telling her about tapping into her powers, my interpretation, and this is what I was reading into it, was that it wasn't that Mulan was special, end of sentence, but it's that Mulan was special because she was a woman. And maybe I was digging too deeply, and the subtext is like the reason why this culture or this time period, why they keep trying to put us down, is because if we're allowed to be everything that we can be, then we will dominate. And I can't remember the exact line of dialogue, but she said something to the effect of like, when the men, like when they realize who you are and this and that, that's when you'll step back. I feel that it's more like a broad exclamation of like, oh, like, yeah, like the patriarchy is rooted in fear. A lot of misogyny is rooted in fear because ignorance is rooted in fear. And it's like, that's an interesting and bold take, but then they didn't really, and I did notice that they kind of left that hanging for a bit. And I was like, oh, this will be interesting if Mulan is not going to be the 100% sort of like the white hat character. If there is some conflict, like maybe she doesn't want to save because like if the culture is oppressive, and maybe she'll say like, screw this village, let the Huns and the invaders come burn it down. Like, you prick should have let me fight. Like that didn't happen, but that would have been an interesting take. But yeah, that was the one of the things I just think it's kind of funny that I enjoyed about the live action take, because my interpretation was that, oh, they're changing it from like, okay, Mulan is this inexplicable quote unquote tomboy who doesn't like the quote unquote girly things. And then when she has this chance to go fight, she can prove herself that she's just as good. But it's just because the story needs her to. There's no motivation. Whereas I felt the live action one was like, oh, are they making all right, I understand why the nut jobs on Reddit are pissed off because they're getting called out. It's like, yeah, dude, you are scared of women. That's why you're saying all these terrible things about women. So yeah, let's go woo Mulan, go wreck some shop. I did like the action sequences, but I thought even that the balance was off. Like maybe if they went full wuxia, it would have felt better, because there are definitely some scenes towards the end during the final plan when they're going to go save the emperor and they have like the small group of soldiers and there's the ambush. That felt just like a straight up action movie when it was focusing on like the dudes that were trapped in the hallways, like, oh, we'll hold them off, and they're just fighting. I was like, whoa, this is intense. This feels like a Marvel movie or like an old school martial arts film. But then they cut to the final scene when the emperor and like the big bad and Mulan, and they're all doing all this sort of pseudo magic realism wushu style stuff. It's like, oh well, okay, that's kind of a completely different style that's happening in like the lower chambers or however the palace is laid out. So that felt a little jarring. Especially
Yeah.
even the training sequences. Like the nice thing about the cartoon is that because the cartoon, it's all fantastical and it's all kind of that same style. Whereas like the training sequence started as sort of like this historical Asian Full Metal Jacket. Like we get to see like the grunts go through boot camp or whatever the equivalent is. And then when Mulan taps into her power and she does like the cool butterfly kick spin, flip sword, spear, it's like, oh, that was odd. It would be like if Private Joker all of a sudden like had Dr. Manhattan's powers in Full Metal Jacket, and instead of shooting himself after shooting the drill sergeant, he just like turned everyone into snowflakes and they all blew away. I love Stanley Kubrick. That would have been awesome. But no, I liked I liked Mulan, the new Mulan. I just thought, I thought the tonal shifts were weird. I loved that there was no music and that they used the score, like the background score, to have little elements pop in. That was cool because I think the ancestor angle wouldn't have played well. I can't see how they could have done that in a not terrible way. And the same thing with Mushu.
Yeah.
Even with the realistic looking CGI dragon, I think that would have felt so out of place compared to the rest of the film. Because they wouldn't have hired Eddie Murphy. It would have been like his contemporary equivalent, which would be what, like a Kevin Hart. And
maybe, yeah.
With that, I mean, since we've all seen it, can you picture Kevin Hart adding color commentary? Like,
I mean, we didn't really touch on that. To replace Robin Williams, they got Will Smith, and Will Smith did a good job, but it's still like, if you're gonna say who's the best genie, is anyone gonna say Will Smith over Robin Williams?
Not yet. I think in time it'll even out.
You think so?
But I think that was a smart casting choice, because I think with the animated sequel to Aladdin, where they got Dan Castellaneta to replace Robin Williams, because Robin Williams wouldn't come back. He was still alive. He just didn't want to do it. Yep. Dan Castellaneta was basically doing a Robin Williams impression, which is horrible because Robin Williams is really the only one who can do Robin Williams. So I thought by casting Will Smith, who's also, for better or worse, whatever your opinions on him, he has a distinctive, charismatic personality and unique in Hollywood. Like Robin Williams definitely is one of a kind. I think you could argue Will Smith, not the same extent, but similarly is also, that is like Will Smith is Will Smith. He's very recognizable, has his own tone. So I think he brought that to the genie rather than trying to like, I'm going to do what Robin Williams did, but drop my G's and have this hip hop. He's like, no, I'm going to be Will Smith. And if you like Will Smith, then you'll like me as a genie. Kind of like if you like Robin Williams, then you enjoyed his genie. So I think over time, when it gets far enough out that both films are just seen as like, oh, those old movies, and I think there'll be an even debate as opposed to right now where it's like, well, Robin Williams was so great, but it's also because Aladdin like still just came out.
Yeah. Well,
I feel like
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I feel like Will Smith's take on the genie compared to Robin Williams is a bit like what Hamilton did to Broadway in comparison to some of the older musicals. In my mind is how I've kind of like, it took me some time to adjust to it because I'm used to, Hello Dolly kind of musicals and not Hamilton. Very different kinds of tones. So I feel like it's a little bit of that. So like it takes a little bit of adjustment, but I could see Will Smith eventually, maybe not usurping Robin Williams. I love Robin Williams, but at least being at the same like popularity level as Robin Williams over time.
Yeah. I would like to ask a question. Mostly this is to you, T. Aaron. The new version of Lady and the Tramp. What are your thoughts about the setting for Lady and the Tramp?
Oh, I thought it should have been a period piece. I mean, I liked everything else about it was fun, but I thought, because I don't know if the animated was a period piece, it felt like that. I think it was kind of ambiguous as to what time period it took place in. Whereas
I think it was supposed to still be kind of the turn of the 20th century America. So it was. I think the time period was the same in both, but they definitely changed a bit about the setting for the new version.
It's like I think they're trying to make it too hip. It was sort of like I enjoyed Lady. I mean, again, I liked all of them. Lady and the Tramp's not in my top 5 or whatever. It was cute. I mean,
Yeah.
What's the setting of the new one?
So basically what they did with the new version of Lady and the Tramp is they still kind of set it in like the turn of the 20th century Americana. I think it was filmed in Savannah is what I read, but it definitely made race not an issue for 1900 America. You had the Jim Deere and Darling characters, I forget who performed them, but it was an interracial couple, which definitely was not the case in the animated version. And this is why I'm asking you specifically what you thought, because I thought it was optically really good, but it did kind of take me out of the story as a person of knowing about history and stuff. It's like,
what's right? Making the period piece, they could have, if they had moved it to either like an ambiguous, just here are people.
yeah,
Focus on the dog, and less. Yeah, once. I mean, on one hand, I understand why, because that's the point of the film, is not to kind of like, because once you open that door, you kind of have to go down that hallway a little bit. And Disney's not really the best to do that. I mean, Princess and the Frog, Song of the South, maybe that's not their wheelhouse to be commenting, but at the same time, it is sort of like, it's good. It's definitely Disney.
Yeah.
So like, so in post-prohibition era New Orleans, this is what you got going on. I don't know if that's accurate. It's
yeah.
If any kids are watching it, they've got a flux capacitor, they're gonna be severely disappointed when they get there.
Well, and that's kind of what I thought about Lady and the Tramp as well, that if you actually went to this time period, it would not look this way. So, but then it also would be a lot dirtier just in general. So
we have passed through almost an hour already, really quickly, and I feel like we could fill another hour. But before we're done, really quickly, there's several more live action films planned coming up. Which ones are you most looking forward to? I could read them off too. It looks like we've got maybe I don't want to read them off. There's so many. Cruella, Little Mermaid, Snow White. There's going to be an Aladdin sequel, Lion King sequel, Jungle Book sequel, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Rose Red, but that's also a Snow White one. So 2 Snow Whites, Bambi, Hercules, Pinocchio. There's quite a few. Lilo and Stitch is supposed to be coming up as well.
Yeah. I mean,
are they not doing animated movies anymore?
Well, they got Pixar, so like they don't really have to.
I guess
there's one coming out in March. There's a new animated one coming to Disney Plus. I guess I don't know if that's Disney or Pixar that did that. I think it was Disney.
That's Soul.
What's it called? What was that?
Soul. I know Soul's coming out.
Soul came out. Soul's coming out now, like this month. No, it's
next week. It's Christmas Day, I think.
Yeah. No, there's another one. I just saw an ad for it a couple days ago. It's coming out in March. I think it's just one word. It starts with like an M, and I'm not thinking of what it is. So they are still doing animated ones, but they take a long time. I mean, an animated film takes them like 5-6 years. A live action one takes them 1, 2, maybe 3 years. Well, I mean, of the film. I mean, I guess it depends on if you're doing a Lion King live action or like, more.
I can tell you which one I'm not looking forward to, and that would be Lion King 2.
Oh, you gotta see it. It's gonna be like Cats. Maybe they're gonna go the complete opposite direction. They're like, you don't like hyper realistic? Here, have this. And we'll get Taylor Swift.
Maybe not.
Actually, that's something we didn't talk about was the live productions of animated films.
But that's because they're not films. Those aren't films.
Well, I mean, I'm not talking about going to see Beauty and the Beast on stage or seeing Lion King on stage. I'm talking about when they had the live stage version on TV of Little Mermaid with
yeah.
The
less
Queen
said about
Latifah as
the
Ursula.
better.
I haven't seen actually any on TV. I've missed every single one, which bums me out a little bit because I am a sucker for a good musical, and I haven't seen any of them.
The live gimmick is what killed it, I think. Like none of them were. I don't think it was bad, but I think make it like they could have just easily just released a musical, and it would like Disney does that all the time. There's tons of them, and they're great. I mean, my kid loves zombie, and now I love Disney zombies. Descendants, I'm having a harder time with because there's certain elements of that, which that's for a different panel, but overall, it's good. It's fine. I guess to get to your question, there's 4 that I'm most looking forward to, but not overall. Really, the only one I'm looking forward to overall is Cruella, which I think is going to be awesome. That's May 2021, I think, is the estimated date. Especially because the description of being an 80s set origin story with a punk vibe. Like, come on, that's going to be fantastic. And it's Craig Gillespie, who did I, Tanya and Lars and the Real Girl, is the director on that. And he knows how to do like whimsical, oddity, fantastical, but grounded in a way that you believe it. Because Lars and the Real Girl is surprisingly gripping and very touching. I, Tanya is an amazing film that was robbed at the Academy Awards. So to have him doing Cruella, it's going to be super exciting. And then Little Mermaid, I'm excited to see David Tiggs as Sebastian.
Me too. I'm very excited for Little Mermaid.
Especially it's Lin-Manuel Miranda tied on as a producer. He's not directing it, but he's working with the original songwriters. And I mean, that's going to be a lot of fun. Also looking forward to Pinocchio, only because Robert Zemeckis is attached to direct. And like, Rob Zemeckis can go one of 2 ways, and both ways would be hilarious when applied to Pinocchio.
Who did the Drew Carey version? That was Geppetto, right?
Wait, Drew Carey did a Pinocchio?
I thought there was. Yeah, I mean, I know that there was a Jonathan Taylor Thomas Pinocchio, but I don't remember if that was the one that had Drew Carey as Geppetto or not.
Oh, wow. I remember the Roberto Benigni Pinocchio, and that was a little too close to the original folktale. Like, it was not whimsical and fun. It was very scary and dark. It's like, oh. And I guess the last one, Peter Pan and Wendy, just because like confirming Jude Law as Hook and Yara Shahidi as Tinkerbell. Those 2 those 2 confirmations, I was like, I'm sold. I'm not a huge Peter Pan fan, but I gotta see Jude Law as Hook because I think he can ham it up with the best of them. And Yara Shahidi as Tink, she's been like, she needs a star-making vehicle, and I think this will do it.
Well, and the live-action versions of the Peter Pan story recently have not historically been well received. So hopefully this will be a better one. It'll have the Disney magic. Hook?
Yeah, that's the last good one was Hook. That was the last.
Yeah, I love Hook. I mean, even Hook though wasn't. I don't want to say. I think Hook was not. It didn't do well.
No.
At the box office.
But it was fantastic.
I think it was better received than either there was one called Peter Pan, and then there's Pan, which was just weird.
They should just skip that and just do a Lost Boys sort of like Game of Thrones-esque prequel, but like Disney-fied Game of Thrones. Because the Lost Boys is a messed up concept when you think about it. Bring back the guy who played Rufio, if he hasn't passed away yet from like an overdose or something. It's just like the Rufio origin story, how he like climbed to like the Iron Throne made of bamboo and imaginary food, laying waste to
HBO, we're giving you like ideas on like the next show you need to pick up on.
Nice.
All right, we're a little bit over. I'm gonna say really quickly the ones that I'm most excited about, because some of my favorite Disney films have been the less popular ones. So like Hunchback of Notre Dame is one of my favorites, and Hercules, and both of those have live action ones coming up. So like I'm super excited about those ones, and Little Mermaid. I'm really excited about Little Mermaid because I am also a sucker for a good Disney princess show as well. Okay, so really quick, like 60-minute speed round, not 60 minutes, 60-second speed round, because we could probably fill 60 minutes to wrap this up. what of the Disney films would you like to see in a live action version that maybe hasn't been announced yet?
I think they all have at this point.
There's so many great ones that haven't just quite yet. My top 5.
Yeah.
60 seconds really quick. Oliver and Company, which was Disney's take
Oh.
on Oliver Twist. It came on in the 80s. It was Billy Joel as the Artful Dodger, just Dodger. It's fantastic. It's about dogs, though. The dogs and cats are Oliver Twist. Sword in the Stone, which was from the early 60s, which is like the Arthur mythos.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. Treasure Planet, which is in the donut hole, because there's like the classic Disney of like, or the new classic with like Lion King, Little Mermaid. And then there was like the new Pixar era, but in between there was like Emperor's New Groove and all these other films that got kind of overlooked because they were in the bubble. Hercules. So Treasure Planet is basically Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, but in space. And that would be incredible because Disney needs a good sci-fi film. Speaking of which, Big Hero 6, which was a Disney picture, not a Pixar picture. I think they could be, with modern special effects, they could do an awesome live action Big Hero 6. And then lastly, Princess and the Frog, just because it was a gorgeous cartoon, not super accurate, but that's not why you go to Disney films. It's not the History Channel presents Walt Disney's Princess and the Frog. I think a live action Princess and the Frog could be incredible, like on par with Cinderella in terms of looks, but then the same quality of storytelling as some of the stronger works.
Yeah, Sword of the Stone is actually going to be a live action.
Is it? Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Hopefully they won't
They've
mess it
announced
up.
it for Disney Plus.
Wizards Battle.
So since you mentioned those, it did remind me, a live action Black Cauldron. I would like to see.
This is what I was gonna say.
Yes.
and a live action version of the Disney version of Robin Hood, where all the characters
with the fox and the
are
photorealistic.
Yes.
Photorealistic.
Yes.
Proper scale
animals.
size. So Robin Hood's like this big.
with facial expressions.
How are you gonna give like birds facial expressions though?
I just want to see, an action like a Prince John and a Sir Hiss and stuff.
The scale is going to be fantastic because foxes are not super tall; they're little creatures. And then Prince John's guards are rhinoceri and hippopotamus.
If anyone can do it, it's Disney. Hell, just make it a furry version. I kind of want to see that now too.
There you go. Yeah, the cats, the cat's version.
Furry version of Robin Hood.
They're all human faces but animal bodies.
Yeah. Okay. With that, we are over time. Thank you all for joining us today to talk about Disney. There is lots of other things happening with Console Room 2021, so make sure to catch some of the other panels. Join us on Discord, and we'll see you all soon. Bye.